possibly get people off by strangling a cat. You know what it is?
The hardest thing is watching somebody that you love suffer.
Sometimes
It always leads.
I really hate you keep setting the stage for them to be complete fucking idiots.
Imagine being born into a family name that the entire world already knows. For Kelly Osbourne, that name has been both a blessing and a curse. Osborne instantly connects her to one of rock's most outrageous icons, Ozzy Osbourne, and to the fiery, outspoken matriarch, Sharon. It's a name that carries power, money, scandal, and an entire legacy of reality TV chaos. But what happens when that name no longer feels like it fully represents who you are, or the future you want for your own child? That's the crossroads Kelly found herself standing at. While most people assumed she'd always proudly carry the Osborne banner, she shocked fans when she revealed her decision to change her last name. And the story behind it is far more dramatic than anyone expected. This wasn't just a sudden whim or a publicity stunt. It was deeply personal, wrapped up in family arguments, generational traditions, and even therapy sessions that pushed her to rethink what identity really means. The truth is, behind the glamorous red carpets and the Instagram-perfect snapshots, Kelly was locked in a private battle that almost broke her relationship. And at the heart of it all was one deceptively simple question: whose name matters most? Hers, her partner's, or the family legacy that's been following her since birth? By the time she finally made her choice, it sparked outrage, support, and a firestorm of debate online. Some said she was standing up for herself, breaking free from outdated traditions. Others claimed she was disrespecting the Osborne name, the very identity that built her career. And the twist? The decision wasn't just about her. It was about protecting the future of her son and making sure his identity reflected both of his parents, not just one. But how did things get to this boiling point, and why did this fight over a last name nearly destroy the one relationship she swore would last? To understand how it all started, you need a quick look at Kelly's world. She grew up in the glare of cameras, introduced to millions through The Osbournes, the reality show that turned her eccentric family into global stars. Her father, Ozzy, was already a rock legend, and her mother, Sharon, a force of nature in both business and media. For Kelly, that family name was never just an identity, it was a brand. Fast forward to recent years, and Kelly's life looks very different. She's now a mother, raising her son Sydney with her longtime partner Sid Wilson, best known as the masked DJ from the heavy metal powerhouse Slipknot. When their son was born, Kelly expected that her name, Osborne, would be part of his identity too. After all, it's not just a name, it represents her bloodline, her journey, and the legacy she's passing down. But when Sydney arrived, something unexpected happened. His official last name was Wilson, taken entirely from his father. And for Kelly, that single detail changed everything. What seemed like a small box to tick on a birth certificate quickly turned into the biggest fight of her relationship. And this wasn't a quiet disagreement behind closed doors. Kelly later admitted it was the biggest fight me and my baby's father have ever had, and probably ever will. But why did one name trigger such a storm? And how did it spiral so far out of control? For Kelly, leaving Osborne off her son's name wasn't just a paperwork issue, it felt like erasing a part of who she was. She had carried that name through every high and low, her struggles in the public eye, her music career, her battles with addiction, and her comeback as a TV personality. To her, Osborne wasn't just her last name, it was proof that she'd survived and built her own identity, even in the shadow of her famous parents. But Sid Wilson saw things differently. Coming from a tight-knit world of his own, he felt strongly that their son should carry his family name without question. To him, giving Sydney the Wilson surname was about heritage, loyalty, and keeping traditions alive. Those two perspectives collided, and what might seem like a minor family decision became a full-blown war. Kelly openly admitted that the argument pushed them to the brink. She described screaming matches, tears, and even questioning whether their relationship could survive such a fundamental disagreement. Imagine two parents, both fiercely protective of their legacy, both unwilling to back down, and the future of their child's identity hanging in the balance. What's more, Kelly wasn't just fighting for herself. She later revealed she felt a deep responsibility to make sure her son's name reflected both of his parents, a modern stance that clashed directly with tradition. And as the pressure mounted, it became clear. This wasn't a fight that could simply fade away on its own. Something had to give. But how do you solve the standoff when neither side is willing to compromise? For Kelly and Sid, the answer came from an unlikely place, and it would completely change the direction of their story. When it became clear that the fight over Sydney's last name wasn't going away, Kelly and Sid made a move that surprised everyone. They turned to couples therapy. For two people who had always lived in the fast lane, slowing down and sitting across from a mediator was a dramatic change of pace. But it worked. In therapy, they were forced to listen to each other without interruptions, without yelling, and without the pressure of winning the argument. Kelly admitted it was uncomfortable at first, but the conversations opened her eyes. For the first time, she could see why Sid felt so strongly about passing down his name. And at the same time, Sid began to understand just how deeply Kelly connected her son's identity to the Osborne legacy. Even Sharon Osbourne, never shy about sharing her opinion, weighed in. She called the idea of children automatically taking only the father's last name dated, a view that echoed what Kelly had been fighting for all along. With her mother's support and therapy sessions creating space for compromise, the icy standoff began to thaw. Eventually, Kelly and Sid found common ground. Instead of choosing one name over the other, they would blend both. Sidney would carry both last names, Wilson and Osborne, honoring his father's tradition while still keeping Kelly's legacy alive. It wasn't a victory for one side or the other, it was a rare balance. But making the decision was only half the battle. The real challenge was facing the world, and the critics who had plenty to say about it. Once the compromise was reached, Kelly and Sid moved forward with something that had once felt impossible, legally changing their son's name. What began as the biggest fight of their relationship ended with a pen and paper, and the decision that Sidney would now carry both surnames. He would be known as Sidney Wilson Osborne, a name that tied him not only to his father's heritage, but also to one of the most famous families in rock history. For Kelly, the decision was more than just a legal formality. It was validation. It meant her son would grow up knowing he wasn't just part of one story, but two. She had fought for her identity, and now that fight was etched into her child's future. But as always with the Osbournes, nothing stays private for long. Once Kelly spoke openly about the change, reactions poured in. Some applauded the move, calling it a progressive and fair compromise that respected both parents equally. Others criticized it, arguing that the Osborne name was being used to keep her family's legacy in the spotlight. And of course, there were those who said she should have simply accepted tradition and left things as they were. No matter what side people took, one thing was clear. The decision had struck a nerve. What seemed like a personal family matter had exploded into a much bigger conversation, one about identity, equality, and the power of a last name. But Kelly wasn't finished making waves just yet, because what came next took the discussion from a private family choice to a public debate that touched on something far deeper than celebrity gossip. The debate over Sidney's last name quickly grew beyond Kelly and Sid's relationship. It tapped into a much larger cultural question. Should children still automatically take their father's last name, or is it time for that tradition to change? For many fans, Kelly's decision represented progress. They saw it as a powerful statement that both parents' identities deserve recognition. Supporters praised her for standing up to outdated customs and showing that legacy isn't one-sided. Social media was flooded with comments from mothers who felt inspired to demand the same for their own kids. But not everyone agreed. Critics accused Kelly of clinging to her famous last name for attention, arguing that the Osborne brand was already etched in history and didn't need to be passed down again. Some even questioned whether Sid Wilson had been pressured into the compromise, sparking rumors of ongoing tension between the couple. Then there were the voices of tradition, people who saw the change as unnecessary, even disrespectful. They argued that names should carry on through fathers as they always had, and that Kelly was challenging something far bigger than her own family. What's undeniable is that her decision turned a deeply personal fight into a public conversation about identity, equality, and legacy. And whether people agreed or not, everyone had an opinion. But for Kelly, the noise didn't matter. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that mattered was that her son's name finally reflected the truth. He belongs to both of them. In the end, what started as the biggest fight of Kelly Osbourne's life became one of her proudest victories. She refused to let her son's identity be defined by tradition alone, and instead carved out a path that honored both sides of his family. For Kelly, the name Osborne isn't just about fame. It's about survival, resilience, and the legacy of a woman who's fought hard to claim her place in the world. But this story goes beyond celebrity drama. It forces us to ask a bigger question. How much power does a last name really hold? Is it just a word written on official documents, or is it a symbol of everything you've lived through and everything you want to pass on? Kelly made her choice. She fought, she compromised, and she changed the narrative for her son's future. And now the question is, if you had the chance, would you do the same? Would you hold on to tradition or rewrite the rules for the next generation?